Welcome to my podcast, The Vedic Worldview. I'm Thom Knoles. Today I have the great delight of being able to have a conversation with an old friend of mine who once upon a time was a protege, but today is a colleague in the teaching of Vedic meditation. His name is Barron Hanson, and Barron comes from a multi-generation family that has lived in the area of southern coast of New South Wales, particularly around a town that is bound by a beautiful river, the town of Nowra, right on the coast between the Shoalhaven River on the north and even, the city straddles that river, and with the Great Pacific Sea on its right hand or eastern boundary. And Barron, welcome. Let me hear a little bit from you about your family and your upbringing in Nowra. What was it like? And
Yeah, welcome.
tell me what your little township is like.
Nowra is a beautiful place. I had the great good fortune of being born here into a fifth generation family. Our family, the Hanson namesake, came from Sweden, Johansson, and they found their way up in the 1890s to the gold rush west of Nowra. It was quite a prominent gold rush in that era, and I think in my family there's always been an adventurous spirit, and through my great grandfather and grandfather and father, and even from my mother's side, there's this adventurous travel nature, and so I grew up in Nowra, but like a lot of people in regional areas, they get out as soon as they can. As a teenager, I had a pretty probably negative perception of Nowra. A lot of people give it a bad rap. It has a lot of social issues, like a lot of regional places in Australia. And so 18 years old, I hit the road with that adventurous spirit. I found my way overseas. I found myself living in New York City for the better part of 8 years. But around 2020, I started to realize just about how far away I was from this beautiful place and family and connection. And there was the devastating bushfires of 2019 and 2020. That was a real catalyst for me to realize that what was important to me was community and being back home. And so I forged a path back to Nowra, which involved meeting you. It involved learning to teach Vedic meditation. And we've slowly but surely been teaching people in our hometown how to meditate. It's been a great journey so far.
And tell me something about your first becoming aware of Vedic meditation by name, and what was it that attracted you to it? Because now you're a proponent of it. So moving from being someone who it caught your eye to being one of the exponents of it in the world, what was the genesis?
Yeah, I lived in New York City, and I was running a media company. We had a number of employees. We were kind of, when you're in that startup mode for business, really burning the candle at both ends, and I was probably indulging in much of the darker sides of New York City as well. Let's call it the city that never sleeps. And I had tried lots of different techniques and different things to calm myself down. I tried ultra distance marathon running. I was pretty good at that, actually. I tried ice bathing. I tried sound bathing. I tried a host of psychedelics, but nothing was really sustainable. And in fact, most of those things were very unsustainable for me. And I think it was probably one too many hangovers in New York City. My business partner, Peter Maiden, who you've met on a few occasions, he was a Vedic meditator, and he suggested, I think he politely kicked me under the table when I was sleeping at lunchtime under my desk with a hangover. And he said, you should try Vedic meditation. And to be honest with you, I did zero research. I Googled Vedic meditation teachers near me. A teacher named Robert Hammond appeared. I sent him an email. He sent me back the thing. We had a short phone call. And within a few days, I was sitting in his beautiful apartment and being initiated into Vedic meditation. And almost immediately, I felt the effects because I kept falling asleep in the 4-day course that I did. I was really fatigued. And he challenged me to try it for about 6 weeks. I did it for 6 weeks every single day. And I've barely missed a day ever since, barely missed a meditation ever since. And it was probably about 4 years of doing the practice and doing it in New York City that's when people started to notice. And this is very common with meditators, is that people start to notice a change. They start to notice that we're a little calmer. We look a little bit fresher. We're cool under pressure. We tend to make better choices, and a lot of people started to ask me, what's your secret? What are you doing? Are you doing a new juice cleanse? Are you? Is that thing you were trying to do? Is it finally working? But it was the meditation, and that was the thing that stuck, and I really wanted to be able to share that with people, and that led me to finding and being connected with you.
And just for our listeners' interest and edification, the Robert Hammond who taught you to meditate is the self-same co-founder of the Highline Park in New York City, the famous Highline Park.
Yeah. And when I was living there, the Highline overtook Central Park as the most visited attraction in New York City, which is quite incredible. And he was, he came up with that idea in meditation and went for it and did it. And, I think one thing that's continued to pop up for me with this practice is nature funds adventurous consciousness. And, Robert had the gusto to go for that. And he continues to teach meditation as well, which is pretty cool because he's created one of the greatest attractions in one of the greatest cities in the world. So
really amazing. And really, between Robert, yourself, and of course, hosts of others, the idea that the public may have that meditation is a kind of purely hippie trippy thing that, you have to have a Volkswagen van with paint on it. And, you have to opt out of society. And, it goes with a kind of hippie lifestyle. When there's so many super achievers like you, like Robert, who swear by it, practice it, and in the case of the two of you, teach it to other people. It's one of the things that I really admire about our technique is that it's been adopted by and is endorsed by people of every walk of life, by the way, including some hippies. So they like it too. So now here you are back in Nowra, and you've had some major social impact events there in the last few years. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, the genesis of how this came about, because I was studying to become a teacher, and one of the prerequisites to become a teacher is there's a course that you've created called Exploring the Veda. And in one of the episodes of Exploring the Veda, one of the weekends, you talk about this idea that there's a collective consciousness, which was a completely new idea to me. And I was really curious about it. And in New York City, I was a filmmaker. And so I jumped online pretty much straight after that weekend, and I was like, films about collective consciousness. And there's, from my research, precisely zero. A few people have tried, ineffective. But there was also some studies and research done that, if you get a small number, say about 1% of a collective meditating, then it can have a ripple effect through that entire field. And the next thing I did was Google what's the population of Nowra? Population of Nowra, about 30,000. What's 1% of 30,000? 300 people. Well, what if I could go back to Nowra and get 300 people to be daily, regularly meditating what kind of effect could that have on things like the crime rates? What kind of things could that have on motor vehicle accidents, education, hospitalizations, all these kinds of things that have been studied and measured before? And so, I decided that was going to be a kind of a pursuit of mine, to see whether we could achieve it first and foremost, and then what would happen. And so I returned back here after initiated training in 2022, and I've been placing my awareness and attention on teaching meditation here, and that has been about 4.5 years now, and we have actually surpassed that number of people who have learnt to meditate. But I know that not everyone's meditating. um, and so the next challenge is, how do we get those people to be regularly every day meditating? And how do we get that number to our group meds? How do we get group meditations up to 300 people at every group meditation? So that's the next iteration of the challenge. But we've also had some incredible success in terms of drawing consciousness energy in. I happen to fall in love and marry, and we now have a child with another initiator named Rachel Gross. And she moved to Nowra. She moved her life from Pittsburgh to Nowra to help this mission and grow a family here. And then 3 of my students have now become teachers. So Nowra has 5 Vedic meditation teachers, and I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably the highest concentration of teachers anywhere in the world, Vedic teachers anywhere in the world. So, we've had some pretty incredible support of nature, and we're looking to continue that. We don't want to stop.
So Nowra's rapidly turning into a hotbed of Vedic meditation.
Indeed.
And I can only use my imagination because I have visited you a couple of times there, but I didn't get a chance to kind of circulate in town that much or get around. Are you a known character in Nowra? I mean, when you walk down the street, are you like high-fiving people and things?
It's interesting, like Nowra is a town which has really embraced meditation. And I think that the timing of this has been quite cosmic. I mean, it's come at the right time. I think maybe 5 or 10 years ago, meditation was probably perhaps not as well known in regional areas. But I think what we're showing in Nowra is that there's a need for this everywhere. Like if we can show that Nowra is able to support a number of teachers and have hundreds of people come and learn Vedic meditation, then surely this just isn't a Nowra phenomenon. And I think, that feeling embraced by the town, and yes, I was also expecting more negativity. I was expecting some pushback. I was expecting, some people to say, "Get out of here, you hippie," perhaps. And yeah, I am regularly embraced by people in the main street of Nowra who say, "Thank you for teaching me," or "Thank you for teaching my son." Or probably one of the funniest interactions I've ever had was, I taught this lady to meditate, and it was one of those students who I just never saw. She did the 4-day course. She came. She didn't look like she particularly loved it. She just sat there and nodded her head, and she left. I never saw her. And it was about 2 years later, and I was standing in the main street on my phone having a phone call, and she just walked up to me and she just ran her finger down my arm, down my shoulder, and she whispered in my ear. She said, "I'm still meditating."
Wow. Fantastic.
And so, little things like that, where it's like, you don't actually know the true effect of what you do. And you've taught so many people to meditate. I'm sure there's people out there who you had that short interaction with, and then they headed out into the world, and they've probably had a huge influence that you just never have known or seen.
Yeah, because that's one of the things about, we offer a course. People learn the technique. They practice it. The onus is on them to continue practicing. They're not joining a club who's going to be like chasing them up and bugging them and asking them for stuff all the time. They opt in as to whether or not they'd like to receive a newsletter. And so really it's up to them to let us know when they do spot us in the street or wherever. To what extent they're enjoying the effect of it, we can only assume the best. That's a very interesting thing. And you've crossed a threshold in your own personal teaching recently. I remember you sending me a text. The numbers of people that you've taught in a relatively short time in a small town. What is that?
Yeah, so in Nowra specifically, we've passed 300, which was the goal of 1%. Personally, I've taught over 500 people already since initiated training, and I think also too, I'm quite proud of that, and I've really applied myself to it. But I think also too the exciting thing for me is that some of my students have now become teachers.
Yeah.
And so, that multiplier effect starts to grow when that happens. And in particular, my first student who became a teacher, she works in the Defence Force. So Nowra is a Navy town. About 10% of the employment is Navy or Navy adjacent, and she's in the Defence Force. And so, she has gone on to then initiate some of her platoon. She's in the Army. She's initiating people who are very high up in the Navy. And so, that effect is the thing that probably excites you the most. And I'm sure you're noticing this in your lengthy career, because there's now multipliers on multipliers. So you're getting the square root effect, the square effect.
I have not only, as it were, the direct offspring of my teaching, but my offspring's offspring and my offspring's offspring's offspring. So it's kind of like having great great grandchildren who are initiators.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's exciting.
Very exciting. Nowra is a town that you would think would lend itself easily to looking at the statistics of before and after. And what do we know about Nowra as regards, as a country town of its size in Australia? Every town has its ups and downs and pros and cons and all of that. What are some of Nowra's social statistics or markers of social statistic that make it an unusual country town, or is it pretty common country town for Australia?
Yeah. Nowra, first and foremost, has a reputation problem. I think a lot of people look down on Nowra. By contrast, there's all these beautiful hamlets around Nowra, places like Berry, Jervis Bay, Gerringong, Huskisson, Kangaroo Valley, some of like world-class small towns that often win like tourism awards. And now you've got Nowra in the middle. And Nowra does face things like higher than average crime rate for New South Wales, for the state that we're living in. There's a lower socioeconomic status in terms of the income earning. There is mental health is a particular issue, particularly male suicides. These are all statistically off the charts compared to the towns around it, and then compared across the state. And it's interesting because this town, it is so naturally beautiful. It's on the Shoalhaven River. It's got these big sandstone cliffs. It's got these beautiful beaches where you can swim. Yet it seems to attract people who are a bit down and out. And it's the end of the train line. If you come from Sydney and you catch the train as far as you can go, if you fall asleep on the train, you wake up in Nowra. But I think when I look at it, like the reputation issue is the thing we're trying to change. And we're actually trying to change that from the inside out. So less about what other people think, but how do we uplift the people of Nowra? How do we show the people here that something good is happening? How do we show the people here that, the destiny of their town is in their hands? And for me, the most powerful tool for that is teaching Vedic meditation. Because when people do that, they realize that, they they can do more. They can give more. They can be, part of a community that is trying to change. And I think that is the key part of this Be Here Nowra story. And you told me something beautiful at the very start of my journey. You said that this story isn't about me. It's the story of Nowra wanting to tell itself through you. And I've always held on to that as being a conduit for the story of Nowra. And the story of Nowra wants to heal. The story of Nowra wants to become that blossoming town it can be.
Tell me about your festivals and what you have planned.
Yes. So when I was studying this idea that collective consciousness can occur with mass meditation events, I came across a particular study that happened in the 1980s where thousands of meditators descended on Washington, D.C. for a summer, and there was some significant changes in the violent crime rate. And I was blown away by the numbers and the success. And one of the challenges with what we've been going through with the Be Here Nowra is how do we measure the change? There is obviously change happening and we can compare to towns of similar sizes, but can we create like a statistically significant event? And so the idea for Here in Nowra was born. And in 2024, we invited hundreds of meditators from all over the world to descend on Nowra for an entire month of activities. And I think one of the beautiful things about this is that, we have this practice of Vedic meditation, and there's lots of people all over the world who are doing this just in their homes. They don't have a community. They maybe have an initiator who they meet up with once a week for a group med. But what we wanted to do is create a place where Vedic meditators could gather and be together and enjoy, the company of being a meditator. And so we also wanted to measure it. So this was important. And this is another lesson that I learned from you, that, before and after measurements. And so could we, during that 1 month period, measure the crime rates? Could we measure hospitalizations? Could we measure car accidents? Is there any significant change when we import all of this energy in for the month? And then when people go home, does it return to, back to normal? And then we can compare against other towns across the state during that month. So it's creating a more scientific approach to measuring this. And at very least, the worst that can happen is that hundreds of meditators get together and have a really good time. And the best could be that we add to this significant body of evidence about collective consciousness. And that's really my passion and goal, is to add to that body of knowledge and that research.
Your festival is rich with arts, culture, music, and talks, knowledge courses. Give me a few examples. What's going on?
Yes, there's something for everyone, and we it's a bit of a choose your own adventure. We have a month of retreats. We have a 15-day rounding retreat. So if people really want to come and get stuck into that, rounding. Yeah, rounding is a process that we engage in with our meditation. It involves asanas, so yoga moves that we combine with light breath work, meditation, and a juicy lie down at the end. It takes about 50 minutes. And then people can engage in this in a retreat setting where they can do multiple rounds in a day. And so we provide a environment which is conducive to lots of rounds. We cook you beautiful Ayurvedic food. Our retreat center happens to be nestled on the Shoalhaven River on 120 acres of pristine bushland. And you can do the rounds. And we have an option for people to do 15 days of rounding, which is a significant amount. And in this time, you can get up to doing 14 rounds a day, which is, I don't know anywhere else other than initiated training where you can do that. So it's a real opportunity for anyone who is, thinking about that. The event we ran in 2024, 2 of the people who came on that retreat ended up on teacher training with you. So it's a nice launchpad for teacher training if people are curious about that. We also have a 4-day retreat. We have a retreat for creatives, so people who work in the creative industries. We have a Exploring the Veda retreat if people have been curious about that knowledge course that you offer. You can come and do Exploring the Veda in a bush setting, retreat setting. So that's the retreats. And then we have 14 wisdom talks. So wisdom talks are given by initiators on topics that they're passionate about. These are open to anyone. They don't have to be meditators. You can come and just listen to an initiator talk about the Vedic worldview on a particular topic that they are very passionate about. We have workshops. You can come and take practical workshops on how to integrate this Vedic knowledge into your everyday life. We have social events. We have sunrise group meditations at the beach. We have group meditations not at the beach. We have rounding. And, it's really about celebrating this practice and taking this knowledge and taking this experience that we have of Vedic meditation and bringing it into the world and into life. And, I think it's such a unique offering, and it's a chance for you to connect with people who are like-minded and love the same things that you do. So,
And suppose I have just a few days and I want to go to Nowra and enjoy some of the offerings in the time that I have. I also heard there are concerts. Is that right?
it's true. Last year we had, in 2024, we had John Butler come and play, and he played a meditation concert. So it wasn't his usual rollicking show. It was more of a sit and relax and close your eyes show. And we sold out the Shoalhaven Entertainment Centre. And we're looking forward to announcing some more music events to go along in 2026. Yeah.
So you're in the process now of enticing some musical talent to come and share their art with everyone.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of room for any of those musicians. If there's still time, if you are hearing this podcast right now and you're a musician and you want to come to Nowra and play, we've got venues and people who want to hear you.
Fantastic. I'm going to give you a name or two at the end of our talk. I'll shoot you a couple of ideas by text. Of people who might actually respond well to this. How do people get involved? What do they do, and what's next? What are the dates, and what's next?
Yep. So the festival is happening for the entire month of October. And if you can make it for a day or a week or a month, please do. I know the people who came for a month last year came and they worked remotely. So they went online during the 9 to 5, and then they enjoyed all of the activities on either side. If you want to get involved, the website is here.in. So here-in.world, and we'll put that in the podcast notes, or you can just Google Here Festival Nowra, and we'll be the first hit on Google. But it's a really beautiful opportunity to be with our community, and that's what I'm passionate about, is bringing people together. And you also get to be part of something in Nowra. Nowra is a happening place, as we said, and see what we've created here. If you're interested in community building, this is a great opportunity to see, what we're building here.
What kind of weather should people expect if they come from the Northern Hemisphere? Because for Americans, October is the start of the autumn, and in fact, in deep autumn.
I'm glad you asked. It is the best time to visit Nowra. And now I sound like a salesman.
Tell away.
It's coming into spring, so we've weathered the southern hemisphere winter that we don't really have. The plants are coming back into abundance. The bees are buzzing and doing their thing. The flowers are coming out. The weather is mid-20s. It's warm during the day, cooler in the evening, not too hot, not too cold. Goldilocks effect. It is just that perfect time of the year when the days are getting longer. You can swim in the river. It's totally safe and clean. It is a real the perfect time of year, and that's why we created it. Is we created it in that month particularly because it's the creme de la creme of Australian weather.
And for people in the Northern Hemisphere who are not all that au fait with Australia, who want to get down to the beach or go for a surf in the waves, all that's there.
All that's there. So one of the coolest things that my local government area has ever done was they created the 100 Beach Challenge. And in the Shoalhaven, which is the LGA we live in, there is 100 beaches, and those 100 beaches rank in some of the top beaches in the entire world. And we haven't done all 100 yet, but it's a worthy exploration. And some of them are the top quality surf beaches that you would have surfed as a youngster coming down from Sydney. You've got bays, you've got some of the whitest sand in the world. The beaches are one of the crown jewels of our area, and some of the lower ranked beaches in those beaches would rank probably higher in most places around the world. So we're really proud of our ocean culture here.
Fantastic. Tell me a little bit about, now that we're on the subject of culture, when I was there, I had the great good fortune of being able to meet some of the indigenous Aboriginal elders of the region. What possibility is there for people to have contact with indigenous culture while they're there and get a better understanding of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nowra has a rich history. It sits on the border of three neighboring countries, tribes, nations, and so it was always a meeting spot. And there is still a lot of rich culture and history here, and we actually promote one of the local companies to do cultural tours. So if you're here, and we'll include this on the website, you can go with a local and travel around and see some of the spaces. And where we are holding our wisdom talks is at the Nowra Showground. And if you walk just a couple hundred meters over the cliff and you go down into the bush near the Nowra Showground, there's a rock painting that is dated 7,000 years old. And so think
Wow.
about, 7,000, and we talk about our Vedic culture being that old, if not older. That is right in the center of Nowra is still these ancient artworks. And that particular painting, as you look at it, it's a rainbow serpent. And if you step back far enough, it's actually a map of the Shoalhaven River as well.
Wow.
And 7,000 years that has been there, and it's been a place where people have met and mapped and continued their journey. So you think about that in terms of our culture and how long it's been there. And the Australian Indigenous culture is the longest continuous surviving culture that we have still left.
Remind me again the dates in October.
October 2026, October 1 to October 31st, so the entire month.
So the whole thing.
Yep.
Good. Anything else that we should talk about, Barron, while we're having our conversation?
Well, I would never miss an opportunity to ask you a question. As you know, we've had many late nights where I have been peppering you with questions, and I do have a couple. And so, first and foremost, we have this opportunity for people to come and do extended periods of rounding, and I'm curious to hear you talk about what would be the effect of someone doing 15 days of rounding in a row. And I know you've done many, many, many days of rounding, and you can listen to some of those stories on this podcast about your experiences rounding. But what could someone expect with coming to do 15 days of rounding?
What tends to happen when we're in that special supervised setting? And I have to emphasize that multiple rounds, as we've described them, where we draw from the ancient yoga tradition, we practice what we call asana, which is just basically some bending and stretching, no pretzel positions. We're not trying to achieve anything or break any records, and we're not looking at each other in the mirror or anything like that. just a bit of gentle bending and stretching. I refer to this as neuromuscular integration. Neuro because it conditions the brain prior to meditation. So you spend about 15 minutes bending your body in a particular way, and it sends a message to the brain to prepare for experiencing transcendence. That means stepping beyond the usual thinking activity into the very abstract, very subtle layers of thinking, or even into the absolute itself. Then the neuro-respiratory integration, which we call, in proper Sanskrit, we call it pranayama. Pranayama means to administer the prana, the life force that's in the air, to your body and to your brain. And I call it neuro-respiratory integration because in the doing of this particular alternate nostril breathing technique, it's a very gentle technique that's done for 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes prior to the meditation, after doing the bending and stretching. Normally, stress will come out during meditation, whether we do these precursors to the meditation, the asanas and the pranayama, or not. But we know that when stress releases during meditation, it kicks up a little bit of activity. We call that, in the jargon of meditators, we call it unstressing. It kicks up a little bit of a tendency to have thought-filled episodes while meditating. When we do the asanas and pranayama first, some of those grosser stresses are released, relieved, dissolved, neutralized prior to us even having the 20 minutes of meditation. So when we do the 20 minutes of meditation, relative to a regular experience that we might have at home, it's relatively more quiet, relatively deeper, relatively more settled. At the end, you referred to the lying down. To complete one round, as we call it, you do a lying down session at the end. And 5-10 minutes lying there just quietly absorbing the effect of the meditation and preparing for the next round. So in a supervised setting, we can do, as Vedic meditators, multiples of this. And, we build up. If we have a long period of time, like you said, 15 days, we can build up to a high number of rounds in a given day. And every individual would be individually supervised by a certified, qualified teacher to make sure that they're within their comfort level. And what to expect? Well, what happens is, with multiple rounding, is there's a systematic lowering of the basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate means, if we measure your breath, number of breaths per minute, we measure what the tidal volume is of your breathing, what the tidal volume is of the heartbeat, because the heart can either beat like this, with lots of pressure down and lots of expansion out like that, or as it does in meditation, it tends to beat a little bit like this, tiny little fluctuations, tiny contractions. And this reflects the fact that in meditation, you're going into a least excited state. And in general terms, the more you can be hypo, and hypo in science means low, the more you can be hypometabolic, the more deeply rested your body is. And so with multiple rounds, the level of metabolic activity outside of meditation is about the equivalent as it would be for the average person during an active eyes closed period. So let me make that graphic. You do about 4 or 5 rounds, maybe more, prior to lunch. And then you go and have lunch with people, and you're talking and you're enjoying yourself. But while you're talking, while you're enjoying yourself, while you're having your delicious food, your body's resting level is the equivalent of what it would be for the average person only during the deepest point of meditation. And your eyes are open, you're talking, you're eating, you're doing things. What this means is that access to that least excited state is unfettered, unshackled. And this means your body can throw off, release and relieve, neutralize stresses that had accumulated over an entire lifetime. And also, it gives the brain the potential for exploring super subtle, hyper acute sensory perception, to be able to enjoy those layers which typically we would refer to as the celestial layers. It just means the finest level phenomenology that's there going on in the relative world around you. Your sensory perception tends to get incredibly acute during the process of rounding. And so it expands your experience considerably. So not only are you receiving a lifetime historic reset, it's like, on our computers or our iPhones, if we need to, because of a problem, we can, press the factory reset button. And this is really like doing multiple rounds like this is like pressing the factory reset button on the entire nervous system, getting it back to the scientific term is homeostasis, in which every cell in the body has access to its entire repertoire of functions, the immune system, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, everything back to normal. And so this is a fantastic opportunity to slow down and even reverse the aging process, to get rid of stresses that had built up subtly throughout our lifetime, many of which we don't even know about, and to liberate our potential. So full liberation of our potential. And it's, to be able to do that with the camaraderie of friends and teachers surrounding you, and an environment where, you're completely supported. This is why we only ever do rounding in these special settings. One would never try to do any of this on one's own at home, with children and with telephones ringing and text messages coming and going and all the usual disruptions and disturbances. A special condition, special time, special place, special techniques of developing consciousness. It just sounds like an absolutely ideal setting. And I don't know of any other setting that any of our colleagues worldwide, Barron, are able to provide to be able to do this. This is a unique opportunity, as far as I know. I don't think there's any place else. Besides the actual process of training to be a teacher, what we call an initiator, where people do go into high levels of rounding for considerable time, but initiator training is not for everybody. And Nowra is for everybody.
Thank you. It's often been said about you, ask Tom the time and he'll tell you how a clock works.
That was one of my
And that was one of those.
one of my guru's favorite sayings about me.
And that was that was a fantastic example of that. Thank you for giving us the physical context as well. So you've spent 25 years plus with probably one of the world's greatest community builders, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, your teacher. And I'm curious, as you've watched our journey evolve down here in Nowra and my journey, is there any wisdom that you can impart from the years spent with Maharishi, particularly around community building and, where I think we're going to continue to try and grow this is like, what can you see or what lessons can you derive from him that we can perhaps apply to Nowra and the community that we're growing here?
I think the main message that he drove to us as teachers, I was one of his teachers, that he gave me a huge amount of responsibility, and fortunately, most of it I met responsibly. But the main message he drove was to get two things: larger numbers of people involved, and that's just an everyday thing. I've taught close to 50,000 people to meditate in my career, and 58 years of teaching. And people often say to me, who are new teachers, "Oh my God, it's just unimaginable. How did you do that?" And I said, well, I started with one or two, three and four, and then it turned into 5 and 6. And, every one of those people that you teach meditation to knows another 10 people who they're going to talk to about it over the next 6 months or a year. And so you're not just teaching one person, you're teaching potentially 10 new people every time you teach one, because each one of them has 10 friends or family members that they're going to drag along eventually within 6 months or a year. So you just have to keep going and adding those increments. And before you know it, the multiplier effect comes. Now you're already having that because several of your offspring, meaning people who you taught to meditate, are now teachers who are bringing people in. And so that multiplier effect naturally applies. So that's one thing, is just, to be open to the possibility of teaching as many people as would like to respond to our simple message. We're simple people, natural. We offer a simple, natural technique to the world. Those who would like to try it, we're here, we're ready, and we'll give it to them at the highest level of expertise. Second thing, of the two things that Maharishi drove home, to get those who already meditate, and that's, much of the audience that we're talking to right now are existing Vedic meditators. Those who already meditate, to get them to cosmic consciousness. That's the state where all the stresses have been released and the mind is completely liberated. To get those to cosmic consciousness as quick as possible. And that growth comes from two things. One is more direct experience of meditation. And the second thing is better intellectual understanding of that process and all of its implications in the waking state. And so knowledge is comprised of these two things: empiricism, which is direct experience, and conceptual delineation. That means to have a good theoretical understanding of what's going on and why as you continue practicing meditation, because it revolutionizes your life, as we know. If it's done twice every day as prescribed, it absolutely will revolutionize anyone's life. And to understand the mechanics of how that's happening and why that's happening is just as important as experiencing it. Because when you have knowledge, intellectual understanding, then you will do less of that inadvertent resisting of the change. When we start going through progressive change, there may be a part of us inadvertently that resists the change. And as meditators, we are gifted with the stability and the adaptability to manage change gracefully. And in fact, given enough time in this kind of practice, we learn how to adore change. It just becomes something, you just can't wait for the latest news about what the change is. It's fantastic fun, actually. So we become more adventurous people, and we need to understand why. And we become more interesting people. And that on its own is going to light us up so that we radiate life for all to enjoy. And people will come to us and say, hey, tell me whatever it is you're on, I want some.
It's like that analogy. What I'm hearing is the meditation and the rounding is like upgrading our hardware, and then the knowledge is the software, like
Correct.
with the iPhone. And I
It's
think
a great analogy.
and hearing that is a bit of like a 1-2 punch. So it's like we need to get people purifying their nervous system and getting rid of the stress through doing the practice. But then we need to also continue to lift people up through the knowledge, such as this podcast. This is a fantastic body of knowledge. And then the advanced knowledge courses like Exploring the Veda and Mastering the Cities. These are the things that are akin to the software upgrades.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I would love for all of my listeners to right away after hearing this podcast episode, have a look at your diaries, as we call them in Australia. Americans call them calendars, schedules, and change things, move things around, and get to Australia. For those of you who are north of the equator, which I'm sure there are millions listening to this right now who are north of the equator, you always had Australia on your bucket list. That's what you tell me. Do something about it. Use this as the pretext to get yourselves down there to the wide brown land, the beautiful gem of the Pacific, Australia, and see that place. Get to Nowra and enjoy some of the offerings of Barron's beautiful festival, October 1 to October 31. If you can't get there for the whole thing, get there for part of it. And and then travel around Australia a bit, add that to your agenda, and really do something about this thing. Don't just talk about, I wish I went to Australia, when you're on your deathbed. Get yourselves down there. It's and participate. You will absolutely love it. You'll absolutely love the worldwide tribe of Vedic meditators that you meet, and you'll have lifetime connections and new friendships and new camaraderie and fantastic memories.
Thank you, Tom, for the support and the conscious energy you put behind this. And I think it comes back to a quote I said at the start of that: nature funds adventurous consciousness. And if you have that adventurous spirit, then nature will support. And look, my great grandfather came to Australia from Stockholm in the 1880s, and it took him 2 years by boat. Now you can just hop on a flight. You can get a train from Central to Nowra, where the end of the line. We'll have someone pick you up. Couldn't be easier.
Fantastic.
And if you live in Sydney, just get on the train. You're already there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for your support, and thank you for this conversation. It's been enlightening for me. So, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.